Hello, I'm James Fitzsimons, and welcome to The Career Scoop, a podcast all about career progression, advice, and experiences aimed at assisting those who are in career transition. Today, we are taking a slightly different approach from our usual show. In this episode, we'll be talking with three highly impressive young professionals, all of whom left universities within the last 5 years, but who are blazing their own trails in their various fields. Our young professionals include Nicole Cosgrove, a Partner Development Manager at Microsoft in Sydney, Australia; Anne-Marie Kelly, a Sales Manager at O'Malley Spirits Trading in Berlin, Germany; and Sally Fitzsimons, a Senior Reseller Operations Specialist at Salesforce here in Dublin, Ireland. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the show. Maybe we'll kick off that with Nicole, who's in Sydney. You might give us a quick overview of you, and then followed by Anne-Marie, who's in Berlin, and Sallyann, who's in Dublin.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. As James said, I'm Nicole Cosgrove. I've been working here at Microsoft in Australia for about 6 months. Previously to that, I was at Dropbox for 3 and a bit years. I moved over here about 6 months after I finished college and have been living it ever since.
So everyone, I'll just introduce myself very quickly. So I'm Anne-Marie. I'm currently based in Berlin. My background is in business studies in German. After graduating, I went into Lidl Ireland as part of their graduate program. Following on from that, I actually took part in the Board BA Fellowship program and studied a master's in international marketing practice with UCD Smurfit. And very recently, I've just started a new role with O'Malley Spirits Trading here in Berlin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sally Fitzsimons, and like Anne-Marie, I started off my graduate career in Trinity doing business in German, and then pretty much straight off the bat started in Salesforce, the CRM company, and have actually been there ever since. And right now I am one of the Senior Partner Program Operations Specialists working in the operations side of the business.
That is great. So to kick off, and who wants to take the start of the first question? What do you like about your job, tasks, people, culture, and why? Maybe throw it at Anne-Marie. Kick it off.
Yeah, so I suppose in terms of my role, it's probably the most recent out of the three on the podcast today. So even just to explain maybe the ins and outs as to why I chose this company and over potential other roles and companies that I was looking for in Germany. So really the first one was the autonomy that I would get from this sort of medium-sized business. So it's very entrepreneurial. It's quite a young company. And coming from the fellowship program where I was essentially a sales nomad over here in Germany, I felt that would be a good transition to then continue that level of responsibility and onus on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. And really on from that as well, this new company that I've started with, O'Malley Spirits, it also continues with that German-Irish link in the international sort of sales market. So originally my career started with a German company in Ireland. It then followed on to an Irish semi-state in Germany. And I feel that this company is the nice medium point as well in terms of transitioning into a permanent position. So really for me, it was, I suppose, that welcoming feeling of having that German-Irish link there and continuing that into the new role. So they were some of the touch points as to why I ended up choosing them.
Great. Nicole, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. I think the most important decision making in any job I've gone for is culture. And I think if I look back at when I was in university or even just school as well, when I think of culture, I thought it was a bit fluffy. I thought it might be, something people say just to get you in the door. But when I started working, I realized how important that actually is. And I think it's Drucker who said culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I totally agree. I think, you can go in and you can love your job, but if you're not enjoying the environment, if you don't enjoy getting on with your team, and if you don't feel, encouraged, it really makes a chore out of your job. So I think that was my most important decision making in any job. And at Microsoft, where I am now, the culture is really amazing, really inclusive, and really encouraging. And I found that I just think it's invaluable to have in a company.
Yeah, absolutely. I jump in there as well because, the company that I work in, Salesforce, culture is a massive part of, their brand. The inclusivity in the culture has been one of my favorite elements of working in Salesforce. I came in straight away from college as a grad and kind of flung into the working world. And, you know, the fear of that initial jump out of education into the real world is, how are you going to do? Are you going to enjoy your job? And one measure I have that is my favorite measure to talk about is Sunday night blues. And I think a lot of people can associate, you know, Sunday night, contemplating the week ahead, dreading it if you are. And the one thing I'm really proud of is that I've rarely ever had that experience in the 4 years that I've been working at Salesforce, which is one thing, you know, out of all of the benefits of working in a company, if you're looking forward to getting up to go to work, I think that's a really important thing to prioritize.
Yeah, that's really good. That's not something I had ever been able to, I suppose, contextualize. But that's so true, actually, now when you come to think of it, in particular, I suppose, when you're coming towards the end of a role as well. I always think that that's interesting to identify. And I think what's most important, particularly when you're looking at careers, is probably starting to think about, okay, what's your day-to-day or what's your week-to-week going to look like? And does that align with your interests so far, be it with what you've studied in university? If you can try pull out of modules, okay, I really liked this aspect, or this one wasn't my favorite. I think that's also good to, I suppose, guide graduates in terms of what they might be interested in. Mistakes,
funny stories. Does anyone want to jump in and share the bloomers? That my one, which I share, is that I had a fantastic client, Japanese client, coming in to see us. It's gone back about 20 years ago, and I was schooled on that it's very important to receive the business card the right way and appropriately respect that process. I practiced it and I practiced it and I practiced it. So the morning came, this very small, petite Japanese man came in. I'd say he's about 4'2". I bowed. As he bowed, I nearly hit him with my head, but that was okay. We got away with that. So he gave me his card, and I looked at his card and I said, looked it right, put it to the side, and I put my card in my top suit pocket, put my hand in, pulled out my card, held it a particular way, passed it across to him, and I said, this is going so well, until I realized I'd given him my dart ticket. And like, this was kind of serious, because this was a guy who's CEO of a big aircraft leasing company. We were going to get a lot of business from him. And I had to say, I'm terribly sorry, Kikuchi-san. I've given you my train ticket. Could I have it back? Here's my business card. And I kept her in the protocol, and I said, that's it. We're done. We've lost the business. But I saw a little smile in his eyes, because I realized very quickly that in the Japanese culture, the kind of senior leaders, they understand a lot more English than they may let on. And he little smile, and he didn't say anything. But we won the contract. But afterwards, I was known as James San, the dart ticket. So, but I've never forgotten that. Anytime I give anything a business card, I always check it. So it's just so. Anyone want to jump in with anything that's happened to you guys?
I think really one of the funniest was in my first job after Trinity. I worked at Web Summit, and I was an event producer. And Sally was actually there that weekend. But I was in Portugal. I was all ready for the big summit. And then I think we had a volunteer who just didn't show up. And one of my colleagues asked, hey, would you mind escorting one of our pretty high profile guests from one end of the conference hall to back to the speaker's lounge? And I was like, yeah, no worries. So get there. And then the person was actually quite high profile. So I think I got a little bit overwhelmed. So we were walking and chatting all the way through, and people were coming over asking for photos. And I was like, oh my God. So one thing I've learned is that I don't want to be famous. The second point was, I think by the time I actually got to the speaker's hall, which is about a good 20-minute walk, I was so flustered, I completely forgot where to go. So I ended up walking this person like down a fire escape. So we were down this long hallway, and going down staircases, and I was like, I don't know where to go. And then she actually just said, she was like, oh, I think it's this way, and I ended up following her then for a bit. So eventually we got her back to her assistant, but at the time I was like, I'm literally trapped this woman in like a fire escape. It's awful.
This doesn't look good.
Held her hostage.
I was like, there's no coming back to this.
And it always feels like that. You're like, there's no coming back. Might as well just hand him my notice now.
Yeah. I will never recover from this.
Yeah. I think for me, it was like my first day, which was like the first day coming in, had no idea what expectation in terms of dress was. So me being like the grad fresh off the boat.
You
don't know what. And again, I mean, I didn't have any experience in that sort of tech space. So I went in like full on pantsuit, briefcase, the works. And the only way I can describe it is if anybody has seen Catch Me If You Can, when Leo DiCaprio rocks up to school in his dad's suit. Because I got there and learned pretty quickly it was like jeans, like smart, but like jeans, it's tech. So I was sitting there. I'm pretty sure they thought I was like one of the lawyers coming in. Like it was not the best way to start. So that was pretty bad.
Oh God. Because I kind of look back on, so for the little graduate program, you train in the supermarkets and in the warehouse for a couple of weeks. I think it's about maybe 10 weeks altogether. Honestly, if there's a camera on those stores that I trained in, I must have looked like a walking disaster at times. Like I'm clumsy by nature on the best of days. I think of the demise I must have done in those stores. Like I'm trying to help out and I used to bake the wrong bakery items. I just could never get the names right. I once charged an old man for 99 bread rolls instead of putting in the correct code. And it was like 8 a.m. and like he was bamboozled and I was bamboozled. We just had such a laugh about it. And then another funny one is that so when you bake in either the morning or the evening, all of the baked goods are stored in like a freezer behind the bakery area. So you have to put on this like big Arctic like big suit as if you're trekking across the North Pole. And I always hate going in because I don't like the cold anyway, but you have to put on these big gloves and I kind of try to go in and sort out all the boxes as quick as possible. But one day I was totally at the end of my tether and I accidentally knocked the box against the wall that had a panic button on it because the door closed. So I stopped the whole store alarms. And I couldn't turn it off because I'd knocked the panic button off the wall. So there wasn't really much I could do, but it was just funny because that came up later on. So as I kind of proceeded with my training, so first I was the person actually working in that store. And then as I kept going on, I was at the regional meetings where it's showing the metrics on like what's measured in the store. And if that panic button goes off like once a quarter, it affects your score with these metrics. And I'm kind of looking at them on this big board like I have ruined you. But the people in the stores, though, they were the best of times, all the same. Yeah. Just the characters you meet. But I'd say they looked at me like, this girl has 2 left feet. Yeah. I look back and laugh.
You gotta laugh.
That's really interesting to hear the kind of difference. That's the small stuff, but I'd say you don't make the same mistake twice, do you?
But I would clumsy this one.
In that sense. So what do you think kind of the skill sets outside your education and maybe some work experience that have got to where you've got to? What kind of maybe outside school stuff you've done? What do you think? Maybe each of you would talk about that.
I'd kind of hold true, even if I was to reflect on it now, that I still think having a restaurant job has prepared me with the most skills across any point in my career. Like when you kind of look back at university, say if you work in a restaurant on a Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, you could be playing sports in between, you could be traveling up to Dublin, back home, outside the city. There's so much multitasking involved in even getting yourself set up to go there. Then once you're on the job, you have to memorize a mountain of details. And then also what I think is very important, just as I'm on the sales side now, it's just being able to, I suppose, maintain a consistent positive face to new strangers on a case-by-case basis. I feel is so important. And I think that maybe not everybody has, but I think that restaurant jobs, and particularly in gastronomy, it really does set you up for presenting yourself professionally, face-to-face contact, multitasking, and staying, I suppose, high energy, despite being overrun with 1,000 other things in your daily life.
Absolutely. I think it's funny because, talking about working as a waitress or a barista, or even in retail, I feel like retail is another one where you learn a lot of life skills, but it is the skill set that you learn in those type of jobs. It does present itself then in the corporate world when you're dealing with, deadlines, pressure, the works. And that's one thing that I would always say, where I worked in a cafe for 2 years or so. And it also teaches you how to think on your feet, working with all different types of personalities. It really kind of sets you up for being able to understand it then when you're in the more formal setting, and all of a sudden you're recognizing, okay, well, I've actually been through this before. I've experienced this type of interaction. I have an idea of how to handle it. So it's definitely stood the test of time, I think.
Completely. I would also say, and I totally agree, working in cafes and restaurants, you learn so much, especially around conflict resolution sometimes too. But I'd also say I'm dyslexic. And I found out I was dyslexic. I was probably in second year of school, third year. And with that, I found myself learning a lot about creativity and problem solving. So it's like something like, I couldn't spell excellent, I couldn't spell ecstatic, so I might change it to like great. And things like that in a workplace, you can adapt quite quickly. So I can see a problem and just think, oh, how am I going to tackle this? And I think having overcome a disability, like a learning disability like that, you can think on your feet and come up with different ways that maybe everyone else can't see. So I think that has helped me a lot, just creative problem solving.
There are three fabulous examples. And what would you say to younger people now who might be 21, 22? They're in COVID at the moment, so it's all a bit dark. How they should kind of creatively look ahead in their heads and to strive to go forward?
I guess I would think of it and say, say if you are coming out of college and maybe the job prospects are not looking great, I would think in a couple of years' time and say, well, you know what, maybe I'm coming out of this, I'm not getting the immediate job that I wanted, but what else can I do? Where can I upskill? And if it's an area of further study, if it's an area of even self-teaching yourself something else, like learn a language or learn anything that you can do to give yourself an extra string to your bow, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think now we have that time where we're not rushing, we're not going anywhere. A lot of people in Ireland especially are stuck at home. So what can you do in that time that will add value or make you stand out even further, I think is very important.
Yeah, that's an absolutely excellent point. And it is something even, in meetings these days that I'm experiencing, people are talking about how they utilize the time, particularly towards the start when the pandemic was fresh on everybody's, minds, and people were in, lockdown. They were learning new languages, learning new instruments, just, had that time to sort of reflect on what it was that they could do while, at home, while quarantining, while socially distancing. And I think from my perspective, one thing, going back on my own experience was towards the end of college, pandemic or no pandemic, can be a very, intimidating time because you have spent X amount of years always knowing what the next step was. And all of a sudden now it's like completely up to you. You have to figure out what the next step is. There's no maybe, how-to guide. It really is up to the situations and the opportunities that you create. But I think it was very easy to fall into that hole of looking at what everybody else is doing and feeling that, the pressure, because particularly myself and Anne-Marie and Nicole, we were all sort of business oriented in college. And there was a big trend, which accounting firm are you going to apply to? How many applications have you put in? And that conversation, it was kind of, for me, it was like that, the last example of the COVID conversation. It was on everybody's mind and everybody was talking about it. And it can be really easy to fall into that trap of comparing yourself to what your peers are doing. And, I fell down that hole where purely out of pressure was applying to jobs that I didn't necessarily, I didn't have a huge grow for the job spec. And it was purely because everybody else around me was doing it. And I think looking back on that now, it's so important to try and take a step back and kind of breathe and think, well, do I actually want to do this? Am I maybe being more influenced by my environment than my actual, drive for this job? And it is very difficult because, you kind of cling to any form of comfort. And if you feel like you're doing what everybody else is doing. It's easy to kind of calm the nerves, but I think it's really important to just self-reflect and try and understand, what is it that you want to do? Like, what job do you think you could be doing that you will go to bed on Sunday not dreading Monday morning?
And I think on that, learn what you don't like as well. I think people focus on finding something they love, but if you find something that you don't like, that's another thing ticked off that you're not going to do. So I think that's very important. And if it's like an internship, or if it's, doing the odd jobs or talking to people in different fields, it's so important, because I think, like, I did an internship in college, and it was in finance, and it was a 3-month long internship. And no offense, maybe if they're ever listening to this, I think I realized on day 3 I hated it, and I wasn't going to end up in this industry. But and at the time I thought, at the beginning, I was like, oh my God, I'm failing. But at the same time, no, that's a really good life lesson. Like, I don't want to be in finance, and thank you for teaching me that, very early on.
Yeah, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's something that I think I've been picking up the last while, particularly as I've switched industry more or less, like going from multinational, semi-state, HR to sales. And it's exactly that you do try and pull out, what you do like and what you don't like. But I think just to even bring it back to I suppose, graduates of today and the struggle that they currently have in terms of finding roles coming out of university. Because I know just even in terms of the last 18 months or however long that this has been going on for, there's now a backlog in terms of graduate programs. A lot of the big companies that I suppose we would have identified as the ones that we wouldn't want to work for, those roles might not even be there now for current graduates. So they nearly don't even have the luxury which we had at the time to I suppose what we like and don't like. But something that it really reminds me of, so 2 of my closest role models, I'd say, in my career would be my 2 older brothers. And really looking at both of them, they really entered their careers coming straight out of the recession in 2008, when I was still that bit younger. And that was really a time for them as well to see what they could do with that time. As in, when you're that young age, you're time rich. There's so much that you can do, but there's a huge amount of frustration there because you want the job and you feel entitled to a certain level of entry, but the market just doesn't allow it. But I saw that they took great advantage of that, be it with further studies. They both got master's degrees and landed the exact opportunities now that they were probably always set out to be. So one brother's in the States and the other's working for a big logistics company in Ireland. And just seeing them as well, using that time wisely, I think is vitally important. So for anyone today, it's okay to be frustrated by all means, but just, again, figure out what you maybe do like and don't like. I'm sure there's plenty of small to medium-sized companies that potentially had to lay off people or restrict numbers, that if you go in and say, hey, I'll help you out with your social media, I'll help you out with the books, even if it's paid, unpaid, just see if you can help them out for a little while. Because that will equally help you develop in certain ways and figure out what might be a good fit for you, be it to the point when a permanent position comes up, either with that company or with another one.
That's some great advice from all 3 of you, for any third year undergrads or fourth year undergrads who are listening. Nicole, you're working in Sydney. Anne-Marie, you're working in Pearl, Sally in Dublin, but you're all working for international companies. Do you want to talk about this word culture? Or is it a word? I'm not sure, because everything's all a bit mixed now, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and we did touch on it a little bit before, culture is very important. And I think it's really nice to see the progression in companies, big tech companies, professional services companies. There is a sort of a movement towards focusing on culture, which I think maybe 10, 15 years ago was more of not a taboo subject, but it was kind of like the soft and, not really, it wasn't held in that high regard. And I think it reflects the times as well. We're seeing a lot more movement around mental health in mainstream media, that being the focus of a lot of societies. And culture is just as important, in my opinion, as, an efficient sales team, an efficient operations team. There's natural ability and there's natural drive and incentive that you can give your workers. But when you create that safe space and that safe environment where someone can go to work and feel supported and feel like there are allies there, I think it makes the world of difference. And I mean, particularly in Salesforce, it's been one of their core messages ever since establishing the business. And, you know, companies are appreciating, it's not just, you know, the trend of the time to be talking about culture, but to actually have that ingrained in the DNA of the company and, you know, the corresponding success that they see when they focus on culture as well as success.
Completely. I think, as you touched on, Salesforce is known for having that strong ahana. And that's the same as I said earlier on. I think we have a great environment in tech where people are open to having these harder conversations and getting everyone together in a room. And I think if you've no culture, what's the point? Because people will come and go and there'll be no longevity. But if you actually have a culture, you're investing in your people, you're investing in the long-term success. And again, as I said, culture eats strategy for breakfast every time.
Yeah, it's just investing, I think, in the impact as well. You know, companies come and go. And I think even at the C-suite level, people are appreciating, you know, doing good and being good. So, and that's something that Mark Benioff talks about, is it's really important to look at the state of the world and as a business, as part of the economy, how you can do well, but also be good in what you do. And I think perpetuating that message, even, you know, even if it is a slow uptake, people are adopting it. You're seeing it across the board. And it's, you know, it's in parallel to mental health not being spoken about as some wishy-washy concept, but as like a full-blown accepted element of any society. So I think it is super, super important in today's day and age for any company that wants to be successful to focus on their culture.
I think that's really interesting because I suppose putting it from the side of tech and that aspect of what you'd said, Sally, there, of companies wanting to be better and be good and employees as well driving that, because I think that is as well an expectation for, I think, our generation. So just coming from the background of Ireland is a country that's built on agriculture and that's something that's very true to our hearts. So that's just what I've loved so far, seeing exactly how to grow the exports of smaller Irish food and drink producers, seeing them all band together and also wanting to do better as a whole, and basically give better produce as well to the international markets. So although my little tongue twister there, I hope that's what
Very good. It's really interesting because in effect, if you get up in the morning with fire in the belly and you enjoy going to somewhere where it's welcoming, you're more likely to be a happier human and you're going to enjoy your work better. And I think that's what's coming out. Networking. I'm curious to understand, being slightly older than you guys. Networking. What does that mean? Pre-COVID, during COVID, or what do you know, or what did you not know about networking? Because networking is an intrinsic part of any career movement. Who wants to jump in first there? This
one brought me back. When I was in fourth year, I actually started a networking blog. And a lot of it was, so I actually looked it up and tried to reread what I had written as someone who's actually in college. And it reminded me the importance of it, because I think a lot of us can find networking a bit unnatural. I do, 100%. And I think if you go in with a clear strategy, and I always said I'd go in and I'd always look up who won the rugby match over the weekend, or, you know, the main headlines of the news. You didn't have to know the details, but if you could drop it in and start, it was just a good conversation starter. So I'd have a couple of conversation starters up my sleeve, kind of know who you want to chat to as well. Kind of ask them questions. So I always found that if I was nervous or ran out of things to say, I'd put it back on them, because people do quite enjoy talking about themselves. So I'd ask them, hey, you know, how did you do this? And then it would come more naturally. I'd also always have an end of a conversation. So in the sense of, I was like, okay, well, when do you leave, or when do you leave them alone? Because you don't really want to be like a clinger or anything either. So I'd have another couple of excuses of the parking meter, or I've got to go meet this person, or a class is coming up. So it was like, you go in, kind of set agenda as such in your head, and then you'd know when to leave. So you're not kind of dwindling around. But I think the most important part of that was also the follow up. So as James said earlier, if you get the business card, use it, follow it up. And even if it's a simple email saying, hey, thank you for that chat, love learning about, you know, your career, or what your experience was as a university student or something like that. But I just think it's always polite. And again, it's a good way of, if you were interested in talking to them afterwards or learning about a little bit more about their job or industry or anything like that, it's a good start.
Yeah, it really is. And I think what you'd said there, Nicole, initially, it's so prevalent, like pushing through the discomfort, because particularly, if you think about our generation, even the generation directly above or below us, everything is screens, everything is mobile, everything is social, but there is an element of the actual face-to-face interaction that's been removed. And that's only been, increased with COVID. So it is trying to overcome the natural sense of maybe exposure, when you're dealing one-to-one with somebody. But we had Bear Grylls actually came and talked to us in work. And he was really, really interesting. And basically the premise of him coming was to talk about, resilience and kind of his mindset and how it fits into the corporate world. And he was talking about resilience and effort, and the way he portrayed them was as physical muscles. So like you go for a walk every day to keep strong and keep fit, you have to also work on the resilience muscle and the effort muscle. And when he said that, it really landed for me on how, these are not physical things, but if you treat them and think of them in that way, it's really about, okay, well, I go for a run to make sure I stay in shape. I'm also going to do these things to make sure I'm keeping my resilience muscle up, strong and keeping that. And I think pushing yourself into elements that make you uncomfortable in the long run can be very beneficial for you, because it's really showing yourself that you can go through something that maybe makes you feel a bit squirmy, or, it's not your strong suit, but if you can come out of it relatively in one piece, it is so positive for you then moving forward in your development and and your confidence as well. Because that's a key thing, I think, in any working environment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I actually, just as you said it there as well, we are sort of a generation that has grown up with screens, and that's something I've really tried to grapple with at the moment, particularly landing into a sales role. When somebody had recently told me the people that you sell to, and in most cases, they're not of your generation. So it's a case of picking up the phone, and that's what they're most comfortable with. So it's about not doing what's most comfortable to you, but for the person you're addressing. I think in terms of, I suppose, the COVID/non-COVID world, those two different, I suppose, environments. One side is, I think what's helped me really develop my network is, if you're already in a company, just chat to people at lunchtime, sit beside new people. If you're an outgoing person, just get friendly with people. And that's going to be, I suppose, the best network you'll ever have. If there's charities within the company, or if there's fundraisers, just get involved. The best way that you can really get to know people is by being engaged and being present. And then I suppose in that instance where you're not face-to-face, or it's maybe outside of your organization, or you're trying to branch into something completely new, I think LinkedIn is just an incredible tool to really, I suppose, branch out and maybe get in front of people that you wouldn't have had the opportunity to ever do face-to-face. So with that one, it's really a case of being clever and seeing what either they're liking, what they're engaged with. Are they taking part in webinars? We are a little bit fortunate now as well with, I suppose, the working from home so often, that there are a lot of available tools online, be it a webinar that you can sign into and you can actually take part. And I found that that's actually been a fantastic talking point, be it either to meet alumni from your university, a network that a friend or a colleague is involved in, just to really spread that one out. So either online or offline, I think it's just about being visible, present, and engaged there. That's going to be the way to really build your personal brand.
The Holy Trinity.
I'll back that up in the sense of, I onboarded remotely. So I joined Microsoft during a time where we weren't in the office. And I think a lot of grads will be facing that kind of experience where you're missing out on the water cooler chats. You're missing out on seeing how the office works and who's who and who you'd naturally, meet as you go. So you kind of have to force yourself a little bit more to ping somebody on Teams or send somebody an email or try and engage a little bit more and pretty push yourself pretty more than you would if you were in an office environment. But I think that's important because when you are joining a company remote, it's very important to get your name out there, get your face out there, and introduce yourself. Because then when you do go back to the office, hopefully soon, you're not starting from fresh.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like a bit of old school coming back from here, that, you know, you keep knocking on the doors, but have something to say when they open. And you never know what, how that, and there's different types of relationships that happen at different times. And in my experience, again, being a little bit older, is that you never know who you're talking to, and they never know who they're talking to. So it's not actually about business. It's about the human talking to human. And in my own experience, you know, most people are, if you approach it the right way, they're up for a conversation. Just don't waste their time, or don't. I think so. Now I'm conscious. You guys are given your time. I know, Nicole, it's nearly 8:15 on Thursday morning in Sydney. You got to go to work, and Marie, it's was it 10:15 in Berlin? My last question, and I want to think about this one before asking it to get it right. We're going to have a number of people listening to this who will be younger people, and we've talked about the younger graduates, or people who've lost their job, or maybe people a bit older who've lost their job. Have you any advices from your journey that you could share? Maybe just impact words that people how they get themselves maybe going in the morning, or how you get yourselves going in the morning, or what you've seen in the various companies and cultures that you could share?
Fake it till you make it. I think that's my number one takeaway.
Say that again.
Fake it till you make it.
Love that.
And especially as women, I think we're a little bit more guilty of being like, oh, am I doing the right thing? I don't know if I'm fully up for this job. I don't know if I'm doing it perfectly as such. But when you think about it, no one is. And I was just listening to yesterday a podcast on Clubhouse, and it was Diane von Furstenberg. And she was saying, you know, women especially go into a room and look at people across the room and say, oh my God, you've got your life together. You know what you're talking about. You know what you're doing. Chances are they don't, and they're looking at you the same way. So it's going in, having that confidence, believe in yourself. You know, you're here for a reason. Show that. And if you don't know, run with it, and you'll probably figure it out as you go. And I think that's rightly or wrongly, I think that's worked quite well for me so far.
Yeah, it's that imposter syndrome. Funnily enough, because that was when I first started, the first sort of corporate talk that we got from one of the managers, who was a really successful guy, and he came in, and it was kind of the sort of traditional thing that happened for the new hire day. And he said, you know, I'm X many years in this industry, in this company, and I still feel like, you know, a bit of an imposter sometimes. So imposter syndrome is not just for the graduate who's fresh out of college. It's for the manager. It's for the director. Everybody experiences at different times, different levels, different meetings. You know, everybody's got a boss if you think about it. So there's always that moment for somebody to, and I think it's important to, you know, it kind of drives you if you feel like you've got to prove yourself. It's really important to keep that kind of front of mind. From my perspective as well, I think the biggest lesson for me has been things I've learned outside the comfort zone. So it's always, you know, the initial job, and you're scaling up and you're learning, you're going to make mistakes. And it's not about fretting about making the mistake. It's about acknowledging the mistake and letting it teach you, because that's, you know, a lot of the time when we're pushed in the deep end, that's when you're going to learn faster, and it'll have a bigger impact on you, because it's survival. You know, it is getting through it, and then you can reflect on it once the storm has passed. But it has been one of the biggest guiding lights for me, is to just not be worried about making the mistake. It's how you bounce back from it, and what it teaches you.
And you learn the most from the things you get wrong.
Oh my God. Absolutely.
No one learns getting things right.
Yeah.
It'd be too easy. Yeah, it would. I would say for recent graduates, or people who are just coming out of a job, or whatever the situation might be, something that I suppose I subconsciously have noticed the last while is just surround yourself by people you aspire to be, or surround yourself by driven, ambitious, creative people that are always looking to do better, be it if that's in a university setting, If there's a job or a career that you were after, the one that you're currently in isn't a good fit, just try find people online, try to potentially find a mentor. I really do think mentorship is something that when you maybe reach this point of sort of early to mid-career, it's essential just to figure out what's going to take you to the next step. And I suppose after that pillar that Sally had mentioned, that where you come out of university and you kind of don't have that template or that landscape laid out for you anymore, it's really up for you to define that. And anything that you think is unique and einzigartig, that they'd say here in Germany, there's probably somebody who's done it before. So just a simple case of keeping an eye out. And that's why LinkedIn is great, and that you can literally see people's career progression and look at those building blocks. So I would say go with that. And I do think, look, professional or personal development isn't all about a 9 to 5. It's not about what you can do on a Monday to Friday basis. I'm sure there are millions of people out there that haven't learned a stitch in their routine job for the last while. So if you're not in a position where you're in that Monday to Friday yet, there's always areas for personal development and skills that you can then transfer to that right job when it eventually comes about. So I keep the faith, and yeah, you're on the right track. Yeah.
I'd also add very quickly as well, because it was one thing that was said to me that before I'd always sort of scoffed at, but there is no such thing as a stupid question. And you'd be surprised how many times the obvious question wasn't the one that was asked. There's been countless times where I've been on calls that, you have an inkling that maybe people aren't on the same page about what they're talking about, but they're more senior than you. So what am I going to do? Calling out in the call, are we sure we're aligned here? And then one time just threw it in there out of curiosity. And it turned out two people had been talking about completely separate things, but hadn't copped onto it. So it was my fear of asking the stupid question. If I had kind of gone with my gut, could have saved us all 80 minutes of talking about 3 separate things, as opposed to, having asked the question. And, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter who you are, what age you are, what job title you have. If you ask the question, people, it's better to be informed than to be kind of moving in the dark on something just because your fear is holding you back.
Completely.
Yeah.
That's really great. And I'm conscious as I said, time permittance. I'd want to thank all 3 of you, Nicole from Sydney, Anne-Marie from Berlin, and Sally from Dublin, excuse me, for joining me on the Career Scoop. And I'm sure our listeners will get a lot of this with great energy there. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Thanks for having us.
Very welcome. Thank you for listening to the Career Scoop, brought to you by Elevate Career Advice and Elevate Executive Selection, Dublin and Bermuda. I'm James Fitzsimons, and I hope you've enjoyed listening. Join us next week for more episodes of the Career Scoop. Hope to see you there.